8:56 this morning. Time to turn to rugby. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Good, thanks.
The sentiment amongst the Munster fans, the arrow's pointing up. It's back-to-back wins in big games on the road against a provincial rival. In a match that, it looked like they were comfortable in for most of the time.
Yeah, they were pretty comfortable. I think it was a very good performance given the expectation going up there and the danger of playing in the Kingspan. And I suppose Ulster looked like a side that were still probably reeling from the loss against Toulouse the week before, but a little bit of consistency in selection. I know there was a few changes, but performance-wise, it gives them a bit of hope now that if they can, build on what they've done the last couple of weeks, they have a decent chance of doing okay in the playoffs and being better prepared for Toulouse in a couple of weeks. But I think that you can see the confidence and the passing is a lot better, and still worries and concerns around some of the set piece, but it was a lot better, Ger.
Is Craig Casey first choice now, or what's the level of competition at? Where's the pendulum?
It's a difficult one. It's one I keep getting asked. I think he's shown he's a top quality player. I think he's still prone to making a mistake or two. Some of his kicking it's not as good as Conor Murray. But to be fair to Conor Murray, he was really good in the two Exeter games as well. So I think having the ability to have either or start, and probably the gap that we spoke about for years with Ireland, particularly around Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton, well, it's closed a little bit with Munster, and I think he is kind of putting his hand up for selection, particularly this time of year when you have to attack teams. And he does add a little bit more as regards that pace and zip, but Conor Murray is still, I think he's played, like I said, played very well in the last couple of weeks. So I'm not sure. Would you start Craig Casey against Toulouse, or would you start Conor Murray? Murray was vital in the 2 weeks, the two games against Exeter, given his size and physical presence. He had some turnovers in that game. So they both have different strengths. I think Craig Casey's strength is obviously his passing and speed delivery, and Conor Murray's still very, very important defensively for Munster when he plays. So I'm not really sure who you start in that game. I suspect that Johan van Graan will still go for Conor Murray, given his experience and that physical presence that he has. But certainly the signs are good that, in maybe some of the evolution and change that's needed, that Craig Casey is going to be a big part of that going forward.
Yeah, so the future is bright, but the present is actually pretty bright as well, and that you do have a player who's being driven to reach the levels that we know he's capable of in Murray, and that if he comes off, or if he's injured, or if anything happens, that you've got a replacement now who's not going to be in any way overwhelmed by what's happening.
I think if Conor Murray was injured, there wouldn't be as much panic that Craig Casey is coming in. There'd be no panic at all, really. I think he's improved his game a lot, and obviously when you're training with the Irish squad and seeing the different standards there, and we know he can be, we know Craig Casey's qualities and what he can do, and he's shown us glimpses, lots of glimpses of that. I think just some of the game management and some of the decision making, and that's obvious. He's still a very young player, but it's still pretty positive for Munster. But it's much better in the last couple of weeks that they've got some positive results. I think that is a big result there. They hadn't won in Belfast since 2016, so it instills a bit of confidence and belief in the side. And I think the Keith Earls try was as good a try as I've seen from Munster in years. So I think they're probably feeling good about themselves. They've Cardiff at home next week now, and then Leinster as well. So they could have been eighth there, and we were talking Friday with Adrian about the results, the way they could have panned out. Munster could easily have been down to eighth, and they would have been, because the Bulls now are eighth and 48 points. That's where Munster would have sat if they lost the game. So they're up to third now, and they're in a decent place, I suppose, and they're with 2 games left.
Obviously the questions around Munster at the moment, while things are positive, are about the coaching ticket and who's going to be in there next year. Like, one of the links over the last couple of days has been with Dennis Leamy, and Bernard Jackman was making the point in the paper yesterday that he'd bring a good wealth of knowledge about some of the academy prospects going through at Leinster as well. Is there any truth to this? Is there anything that you've heard that suggests that Leamy could be making a bit of a Munster comeback?
Not really. I'm just hearing the rumours as well. I'm sure Leinster won't want to lose him. I think he probably slipped through the net in Munster, and Leinster picked him up a couple of years ago with their academy, and obviously Leo's impressed with him, brought him into the senior squad. And I heard Josh van der Fleer speaking about him. He's kind of been sitting behind the scenes quietly, hasn't he, in Leinster, and not a lot said. He's not there on match days. He does the contact skills and breakdown work and defensive stuff with them during the week. A mixture of all of that. But look, I played with Dennis for a long time. He's a great character. He's quiet. He's the kind of fellow when he speaks, people listen. And he's still relatively inexperienced. But it wouldn't, it's no surprise that Munster are looking to try and get someone like him back. We don't know. I don't know. We're only hearing that speculation. I think, again, we were speculating a lot about Graham Rowntree and the head coach position. Mike Prendergast has been mentioned, and Dennis Leamy. They're the only two people I've heard outside of in the public, if you like, in the last few weeks. But
do you think Prendergast?
I think it would be exciting.
Do you think Prendergast is likely?
I would say pretty likely. It depends. I think he's definitely someone that Munster are interested in, and vice versa. But I think Mike still is contracted in France, and so who knows where that's going to end up. You know what I mean? And if he's actually going to make that decision, I think for any person working in sport, and I would say that Munster interests him. Of course, he's been on the road for 9 years now in France, and to go back to your hometown club, and probably similar with Dennis. Dennis is trying to progress his career in rugby coaching as well. He's in an incredible environment at the moment. Does he decide to stay with that and develop himself more? That's a real possibility, and it's the same for Mike. Does he stay on in France? I think he's very well respected there, but I think the management team that Graham Rowntree assembles, that's really important, because it's blatantly obvious that the players need to be upskilled more, and the attack game needs to be improved more. And I think putting the ingredients and the people involved that can do that. And I think having former Munster players come back in is the way to go now, if they're available and if they've got good coaching CVs, which certainly Mikey Prendergast has, and Dennis is less so, because he's only in the game a couple of years, really.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like, allied to Rowntree's experience, it will bring that sense of identity back pretty quickly, and it will be very exciting. The one thing you'd have to say is that, like, as the injuries have cleared up and as the best players have been available for them, their attacking style seems to be evolving. We're not in the situation we were at the start of the season, where we weren't sure what Munster were trying to do. They do appear to be trying to keep the ball alive more often. They do appear to be trying to get their best players in space more often. They do appear to have some ideas, and like, it might be a massive oversimplification, but we've had a long period now, months, where we've had Joey Carberry fit, where Keith Earls is back in the team, where Damien Dielende is fit, where Chris Farrell is alongside him. They don't have strength and depth, and when those players are injured, it's not like Leinster, who can put out a team and say, okay, play exactly the same way, because we've 40 players who are almost as good as each other. For Munster, when their best players are playing well, they're a really good team.
And I think that's the key for the next couple of weeks. And if you the season has been so stop-start, and when you don't have the same depth across the board with COVID, with the injuries, with all those disruptions that happened pre-Christmas, you get better when you play matches. That's very, very obvious, and I think they've improved in the last couple of weeks. I think it shows around some of their attack that there is the capabilities are there. And I think there's been a gradual change since Christmas, particularly since that Connacht game at Christmas, where that highlighted a very blunt approach in the sports ground. The lack of ambition to pass or attack, and that was there for everybody to see. I think it was 45 passes in the game, and Craig Casey had 24 or 5 of them himself. So I think they've had to change, and I think they've looked at it and tried to change. And we've seen glimpses of that. There's still problems and issues around power and physicality and the discipline in the last couple of weeks. That away Exeter game, set piece the other night was under pressure at times, and nearly cost them in the end. But I think, look, there's certainly been improvements. Have they enough power and strength to go on and get to a final of the URC or progress to the semi-final of Europe? There's still doubts there in my mind, but on their day, if they get things right, I think they're in a much better place now than they were 6 months ago.
Leinster were beaten by the Sharks 28-23. It was a Sharks team festooned with Springboks, and it was an unrecognisable Leinster team, and yet at the end of the game it was Leinster who were on the Sharks try line trying to get a try that would have tied the game and maybe kick a conversion to win it. So I know that they're going to be disappointed that they didn't win the game, but it's quite the performance to be able to go against a team like that and give yourselves an opportunity to win it.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I think they did so well in that game against an incredibly powerful side, and I think where they came unstuck and was probably line out maul and the scrum at times, and sometimes kind of just pure physicality in the contact areas. But they could have and possibly should have won that game at the end. They were attacking the Sharks line, and you could see the reaction of the Sharks players at the end. Loads of South African internationals playing in that team. Khaleesi, who's the South African captain, you didn't really see much of him in the game. I was surprised and shocked, but incredible power from them. But let's be honest, this was a Leinster B side who nearly beat the Sharks in South Africa, possibly could have. So it just shows the depth and the strength they have there in the squad, and the amount of changes that Leo Cullen was able to make. Even some of the substitutions during the game. I think Andrew Porter was coming off at one stage, and I was like, Jesus, they're defending a 5 metre line out and you're taking off Andrew Porter. But I think Leo just has the confidence and has a real belief in his squad and in some of those younger players, the hunger and the desire to perform at that level, and they're in a very good place. I think they're 9 points ahead of the Stormers. They could probably afford to pick up a couple of losing bonus points this week against the Stormers, and I know they'll want to beat Munster in the last game, but they're definitely going to be in the top 2, even if they didn't win the last 2 games. So in a very, very strong position. And I think when you consider all the internationals they can bring back when they come back from South Africa, their focus will solely be on winning the European Cup and winning the URC, and I think they're certainly the team and the squad to beat.
Can we just move on to yesterday at Welford Road, Alan, in the Six Nations? Ireland hammered 69-0 by England. It was 10-0 at half time. The extra fitness, the professionalism that kind of feeds into that fitness was just blatant to see in that second half. And we were having this conversation with you on Friday about the missing sevens players, and like you make the very valid point that in an ideal world, having depth to be able to have a good sevens programme and a good 15s programme is where every rugby country wants to be. When you look at that performance yesterday though, at what stage if we take into account the report and all the good work that might be being done behind the scenes, are these sort of results actually doing long-term damage, whereby any young person watching that game yesterday isn't necessarily being pushed to play rugby with the view for playing for Ireland because England are just so far ahead of them? And at what point do the IRFU actually need to start taking a very short-term view on this to try and arrest the growing gap between Ireland and the bigger teams? And I mean professional contracts. I know they'll want a long-term plan, but at what point do they need to start, shipping some water now at this point and trying to close that gap now and for next year's Six Nations?
Yeah, I think that's something that's probably going to happen probably sooner rather than later, but we're not surprised, are we, by the results? I think, nobody's shocked here. Just England are the best team in the world. The conditioning, the tries they scored yesterday, the accuracy, the power, the complete mix that they can bring to their game is phenomenal. Regarding kind of putting younger girls off, I don't think that would be something that this would scare people to go and play for Ireland, because I believe that we're at a kind of a point now where I wouldn't say it's bottom of the barrel, but it can only get better. I think the development, the skills, the structures, the short-term solution probably is contracts and trying to contract players, because what we saw yesterday would indicate that, fitness, power, strength and conditioning, all those kind of things came into play in the second half. And being a full-time athlete as opposed to amateur athletes, I know some of the girls play in England, but the English team, they can rest and recover this morning. They can do their ice baths. They can have their recovery day. The rest of the Irish girls are back to work or back to college or whatever they're doing.
So does that not suggest that England are the ones that are going to get better rather than Ireland? Like if you're saying that this is the bottom of the barrel, there's no guarantee that England don't open the gap further.
Yeah, they could. Of course they could. They've got better in the last number of years, got more powerful. And this isn't a quick solution, Adrian, on that we contract 20 Irish girls and they're going to be in incredible shape for the next Six Nations. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a couple of years. And what you want to see is improvements, skill improvements, strength improvements, rugby knowledge, more understanding, higher quality games in the AIL, more players coming through. And the report suggests all that it's going to happen. But I think some of the Irish players, I think maybe the short-term solution is to try and at least get part-time contracts or get those players contracted in the next period of time. But it's difficult to just, like I said, it's not something that we didn't expect before the weekend. We knew this was capable of happening. They've scored 42 tries in 4 games, the English players, and of course they could get better. But on the evidence of what you see from them now, there's very little room to improve anymore, because they're so dominant against every side they play against. And I think it's something now that has to, definitely be looked at and activate some of the points that came up in the report. But the danger, I think what's more important here on the short-term solution is contract the players. But, if you have a raft of those players then that get injured or missing or not playing well, it's the players coming up. I think it has to go hand in hand with development. Okay. I think that's really important, and to try and increase the level of the competition and the level of games we see in the AEL week after week. Okay. Get more girls playing, I think it's something that certainly could be accelerated.
All right, we got to leave it there. Alan Quinlan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers.
Looking forward to this week's episode of the Red 78 podcast, where there'll be more analysis and reaction to the Ulster game, and looking forward to what's coming down the tracks over the next few weeks, and no doubt speculation about what the makeup of the backroom team under Graham Rowntree is going to look like.